And welcome to today's club lunch. My name is King-Cheung, Correspondent Governor of the FCC. I know you've probably all turned off your phones, but hey, one last check wouldn't hurt. It's nearly always, a bad thing when journalists are themselves the news. And it was certainly the case on February 26 when Ming Pao's Kevin Lau was brutally attacked in broad daylight. And then there are the non-violent but equally worrying attacks on press freedoms, including the way, for example, Bloomberg has silenced its reporters and editors in Hong Kong and in the mainland. It's just one thing after another. What's going on? Local journalists on the stage today. First, on my left, Shirley, Vice Chairperson of the Hong Kong Journalists Association and South China Morning Post columnist. In the middle, familiar face, Ching, journalist, political commentator, and who spent 3 years in jail in the mainland. And then further to the left, Casey Chan, who is the Deputy Publisher and Executive Director of Hong Kong Economic Journal, and the paper's former editor. Start taking questions from the floor. We'll start with you, King-Cheung. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everybody. Your presence will be a very strong support for we journalists, because we need your support in order to safeguard our press freedom in Hong Kong. Now, I was given 5 minutes to give a small presentation. I'll try to keep it as brief as possible. Now, the FCC's question is press freedom under attack? Now, there are two diametrically different views. First of all, for me, press freedom has never been worse. But for others, we saw a lot of, or some reports that press freedom has never been best. Press freedom now is the best in Hong Kong's history. Where do we get these reports? Asia Week, February 2nd. They have a cover story after Ming Pao's Kevin Lau was replaced. And commenting on a lot of rallies on behalf of Kelvin, Asia Week put out a cover story saying that all the efforts to protect press freedom in Hong Kong were but white terror. They were similar to the Marxian style of witch hunting. Now, this is one sort of view. And then, on the very day that Kevin Lau was attacked, Ming Pao has a columnist putting out a column saying that all those who worry about press freedom in Hong Kong are simply worrying that the sky will fall. Now, these are the types of opinions that are diametrically from ours. Now, let's take a look at the world's opinion. In 2009, Freedom House has its annual survey. For the first time, Hong Kong was put under the category of partly free status. Whereas prior to that, all along, we have enjoyed the status of having a free press. But since 2009, we're put under the category of partly free. And also, the Reporters Without Borders, the French organization, started a survey on world freedom, press freedom situation worldwide. In 2002, when it started the first ranking, Hong Kong was placed 18th position. Last year, it had dropped to 61. So this is world opinion of whether Hong Kong press freedom is good or bad. Now, what about the local opinion? Here, I would like to draw your attention to two highly respected legal practitioners. First of all, the retired Chief Justice Andrew Lee made a speech in Hong Kong U, commenting on Kelvin's case. He said, "The case has caused Hong Kongers to become extremely worried about freedom of speech. So I think each of us needs to be highly vigilant in protecting our freedoms." Now, this is the comment made by the ex-Chief Justice. What about another legal practitioner, the ex-AG, Wang Yanlong? He also made a similar speech in the University of Hong Kong, saying that Kevin Lau's case shows that the core of that societal consensus was wounded, our societal consensus. The baseline fundamentals are being shaken. The shocks went beyond the natural abhorrence to the violence and cruelty. And he spoke very eloquently about the need to protect press freedom. I'm not going to cite all his speech. You can see it in the Hong Kong U website. Now, Emily Lau, the legislator, has proposed a motion condemning the attack on Kevin Lau. Here, in her proposal, she lists out 12 major attacks, physical attacks on journalists. Now, apart from the first two, which took place decades ago, all the rest took place within the last 2 years. There are altogether 10 brutal attacks on journalists and media corporations. Now, obviously, there are different ways to intimidate the press. First of all, it is physical assault. For example, Chen Ping, the publisher of Yangguang Siwu. And then Ching, who is the publisher of the free newspaper AM 730, and commentating in the last issue, the Lau Zhuntou, Kevin Lau's incident. And of course, there are also attacks on the Hong Kong Morning Post. But since the Hong Kong Morning Post has not been published yet, so it is very difficult to ascertain whether it is related to their reporting coverage or not. So I did not include the Hong Kong Morning Post here. Apart from physical assault, there are criminal threats. For example, Apple Daily's publisher, Lai Ji-ying, has got some people throwing the axes at his house, and the burning of Apple Daily. We have seen economic sanction by withdrawing advertisement. This happened to Apple Daily and AM 730. We have seen the licensing mechanism, which silenced talk show host Li Huailing, the commercial radio. And we have also seen licensing arrangement which caused a lot of outrage over the Hong Kong TV issue. And then you have the reshuffling of editors. In the last 2 years, 3 major newspapers have seen their chief editors reshuffled. And then we have sacking of outspoken journalists like Sammy Ng and the lady Li Huiling. And we have also seen doctoring of communist articles, like some very famous journalists Lau Yuexiu, Johnny Lau, Qin Jikin, Lin Yuzhen, and the economic daily Zhou Boyin. And of course, we have seen the CE serving warning letters to columnists in order to silence criticism. Now, my time is up already. And I hope to share with you my observation of other issues. But I have to leave the stage now. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, King-Cheung, for setting the scene. Okay, next, Shirley, your introductory remark, please.
If many of you have been here for Kelvin's case, I will have to disappoint you because I'm not going to talk about Kelvin's case. I'm not going to tell you who attacked him. Instead, I'm going to talk about my personal case. I've been a journalist, a financial journalist, for 2 decades. I'm lucky enough to go hand in hand with the State Enterprise Development of China. I have a great time. Only once in the past 2 decades that I've witnessed self-censorship. That was when I was being too critical against a local tycoon. That does not happen with the Morning Post, but with my former employer. So I don't have a personal feeling on how bad the situation is. I can pull whatever information I want from the internet. I'm really happy with what I've been seeing, I guess, like most of you. Business as usual. But I become an exco of the Journalists Association to do training, because I think the journalists are not doing good enough. They need to be more professionals, not because I see myself as a crusader for press freedom. But as time goes by, when Ming Pao decided to remove Kelvin, and when commercial radio sacked Ms. Li Weiling, I sense great comfort because for me, those 2 media or institutions are the remaining independent media of Hong Kong or the relatively critical media of Hong Kong. As I decided I have to do something about that. So as I read through, try to collect cases of self-censorships that happens in the political arena, I was shocked. I hate to use that word because it makes me appear really ignorant of what's going on in Hong Kong. But the cases that I've seen are really appalling to me, in the sense that there were certain academics were blacklisted by some newspaper for being too liberal. Journalists were told not to call them. I mean, among those academics are some professor with whom I share a room in my young days. I know how liberal and critical they are. There were also commands that tell journalists not to, I don't want to see any name of political dissident from China in my newspaper. That's in February, which is a month to go before the big legislative meeting in China. So this is the kind of cases that we've been seeing. We were told how headlines were censored, certain names should never appear, certain photos were taken away. All of those cases had nothing to do with the tycoons, but everything to do with the government and with Beijing. And that formed the background of the first rally by the Hong Kong Journalists Association. And if I have any doubt about the deterioration of press freedom, I have 0 doubt during the aftermath of our march and rally. The coverage of that demonstrations is very telling. 6,600 people turned up in the J8's rally for press freedom. At the same time, another rally with about 80 people turned up. they were making criticisms against press freedom, meaning the journalists are being that bad, poor quality, why should we allow them freedom? So in the evening news, we, both television stations gave them equal airtime. That is, for one with several thousand people turn up and one with less than 100 to get the same airtime. This is the kind of balanced things that we see in the media nowadays. And then, to my great sadness, Kelvin was attacked. We have another rally. And then, again, we have to take more interviews from radio, TVs, and newspaper. The kind of criticisms we get during those interviews are amazing. Just to quote an example, in one of the phone-in program, I was asked, what is the Journalists Association going to do after all the demonstrations? I would say, yes, certainly it's time for education. We're going to, we have been visiting secondary school. We're going to tell our kids what's going on in Hong Kong and why is press freedom so important. The host, which is a former journalist, she asked, so you are brainwashing our kids? Excuse me, what do you mean by brainwashing? You are telling our kids about press freedom. You are brainwashing them. I was quite speechless. Since when did press freedom become a taboo of Hong Kong? And since when press freedom become a political thing? So next time, will we be stopped from telling our kids that you have to breathe, you have to eat? So this is the sort of situation we are facing in Hong Kong. Nowadays, you're going to, I mean, for some of you who does not read Chinese, sorry, you've missed out a lot. In today's Chinese media, you're going to see the mainstream criticism being our media being biased, being too critical against the government. Should we allow them that much freedom? Should we do something about it? And then, unfortunately, the mainstream media those mainstream media is talking about are only about one or few newspapers nowadays. So this is the situation we are facing. So are we being bearish? That's the jargon of a financial journalist. No, I'm being optimistic in the sense that ever since the demonstration we have, with the massive turnout of public support, we're seeing more journalists or commentators ready to come out to tell us the case of self-censorship. Recently, we have 2 cases. And interesting enough, following that 2 public cases, another veteran columnist come write in his blog for the first time about his self-censorship case, which happened several months ago. Those are encouraging signs. And of course, for them to keep doing that, it will only be possible only if you guys, each and every of you, come in and support press freedom. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Shirley. Casey, your turn.
Well, I'm not an active member in JA and also not an active member in advocating press freedom or democracy because I always believe that as a professional journalist, we should stand behind and let people say or express their views. We are doing our own job. But as Ching-Cheung and Shirley told us that many things happen in these few years and make me think about, is it the press freedom is, not under attack, is under threatening by different people or different institutions. And I can't agree more than Ching-Cheung's account of, things that happened in the past few years. And when Kevin's case was happened, and it made me and also many friends feel that Hong Kong are going back to a third world. The journalists are still under a threat of their life, because of their job or they're carrying on their duty. So I also, as not always, walk on the street and enjoy the protests. I remember that I joined in the June 4th incident. I've joined in the 2003, the national security legislation. And then I think the third time is that I joined, I think it's JA's organized the protest on Sunday, on March. And so I think a lot of things changes us in these years. Especially I feel a very high pressure on 2012, the CE election. The reason why I don't know the whole picture, but you can feel that a lot of people want to influence the media, want to, well, in Chinese we call them misang, make some of the voices disappear, or make some of the commentary cannot, expressed in the newspaper or radio, or doing these kind of things. So I think many journalists now feel that well, things have really changed, and the reason why I think maybe that's especially after the handover. I think Hong Kong, basically the whole structure on economic front and also political fronts have deeply changed. On political side, I think Hong Kong and China are really sharing the different values. I think press freedom is one of the very, you see the big gaps and the big differences. And also in economy, we also feel that Hong Kong become a very international market, and now we rely mainly on mainland investment, or even in the stock market, you can see more than, I think, 80% of the companies and the money are coming from China, related to China. So, I mean, the whole city here are now, getting the signal of, that's the political front and the economic front has changed. And then it seems that people also want our press freedom to change to entertain somebody. And, but I mean, I think as Ching-Cheung or Shirley or I, as in this, in journalism for many years, I think we treasure the press freedom very much. And I think it's a core value of Hong Kong. And it's also makes difference with Hong Kong and mainland. I mean, why Hong Kong is not a common Chinese city, I think we enjoy our press freedom is one of the very important factor. So I think they make a very good comment and observation. And what I want to say, last but not the least, when you read the book, Karl Popper's Open Society and its Enemies, the book told you that even though you have democracy, you need the principle of the check and balance. And I think the press freedom is one of the very important factors, that even though we have democracy, we should have freedom of press to let people say what they think and tell the truth and tell what Hong Kong people think about, 所感所想 in Chinese. And that's what I said. Yeah, thank you.
And perhaps we need it more when we don't have democracy, right? Thank you very much, Casey. So we've got about 20 minutes left for questions. If you'd like to ask a question, please raise your hand, wait for the microphone, and tell us who you are. I'm trying to move this so that I can see that side of the room. Oops, I can't, sorry. I just have to stand up, yes. Joel.
Just for a point of clarification, I'm Joel Lakin, but I'm speaking to you now on behalf of an organization called the Council of Public Relation Firms of Hong Kong, CPRF. We're looking at this issue as an organization, very interested in what everyone here is doing. A quick clarification on something that, who referred to Asia Week, February 14th, 2014. Asia Week shut down by Time Magazine about 5 years ago.
I think
you mean Yao Zhao Zhao.
I think Ching-Cheung you were referring to the Chinese
Yao Zhao Zhao. Okay, that was all I wanted to point out.
Steve, go for it. It's coming.
Steve Vines. What interests me about all of this is the data Ching-Cheong provided and all the rest of it, is to what extent do any of you think this is coordinated? To what extent do you think it's ad hoc? In other words, is there some evil hand somewhere actually deciding Hong Kong press has to be curbed?
I think if you consider each case as an individual case, then, I mean, each attack, each physical attack individually, then you can come up with a lot of explanation or hypothesis on why a certain guy was attacked. For example, even if in Kevin's case, right now, I think Ming Pao has focused on about 5 to 6 major stories, which might cause Kelvin to be struck. So if you consider the case each by each, then each case might have different reason. But if you consider the entire atmosphere in the industry, I mean, the source of threat is pretty clear. And the source of threat, to me, comes directly from across the border. It was the sort of subtle pressure on individual journalists as well as media organizations that you see all these changes, this self-censorship, and this change of editorship. I mean, these are all related to certain types of pressure from above.
But, I mean, we're all hoping that the criminal minds behind Mr. Lau's attack will be caught and given just punishment. But so far, there's been very little to shed light on the why and the who. I mean, in general, Hong Kong is a very safe city. People just don't get chopped up in broad daylight generally, unless you're a member of the tribe, right? So what I don't understand is that people who get beaten up and chopped up on the streets tend to be journalists, right? And surely there are other ways, as you have listed in your PowerPoints, to shut us up. Why resort to such base and dramatic, theatrical violence? I mean, there are those who would say that that shows that it's not something to do with Beijing. Shirley, do you have a view on that?
Well, I guess I hate to associate Kelvin's case with any political things. The way I see it is, as journalists in Hong Kong, we are increasingly reporting on issues related to mainland China. We are dealing with a group of people which we have no understanding about. They have a different value system or whatsoever, which means when we write something, we have never been able to assess how bad it can get and how many people will get burned behind that story. When I say how many people will get burned, we're talking about who are behind certain businessmen that you are writing about. You have absolutely no idea what is that, which means you will have no idea what will happen to you. This is the sort of situations that journalists in Hong Kong are now facing.
I mean, you mentioned just now in your speech that in February there was this direct order at the South China Morning Post not to mention specific dissidents. Could you expand on that? I mean, that's something concrete.
No, I did not say South China Morning Post.
Oh, I see. Sorry. Okay. Well, I'm glad I asked you to clarify.
I did not say that. In this case, it is not. I must to clarify. It is not the Morning Post. But can you repeat the question? Why?
So but you're aware that at one paper that there was the specific order from?
Yes, we were told by fellow journalists that's the case, because to prepare for the February rally, we have been collecting cases of self-censorships, and that is one of the cases that got mentioned.
But how is it? I mean, I'm curious to know exactly how it is carried out. These sort of orders. Did the journalists explain?
That should be the same as I order my kids to go to bed at 9, which is we don't want to. So, okay, you get instructions from your editor. This is it. As simple as that, and as brutal as that.
Sorry, Casey, I'd like to hear your views on whether you're aware of that sort of thing happening at newspapers. Newspapers, perhaps, where the owners. I'm trying to not be too direct. The owners may have a lot of investment in mainland China, and for years we have heard allegations that interest would lead to self-censorship, even if Beijing or the government has said nothing. Are you aware of that happening in Hong Kong?
Well, I think now nearly all businessmen are investing in China. I think you can't find a guy who don't invest in China but have money to invest. Yeah. So I think that's our reality. Yeah. So you should live with it, and I think it's a process of educate the owners. Because if you invest in the media, you can't make it as a mouthpiece. So why you bother to do this? I mean, you own a media. You want to say something. Sending a message, and then the editorial. They have their own logic of how to making news. I mean, it's a process, and so I won't say that all businessmen who have business in China are conservative. I tend to, suppress the different voices. I don't think so, because I think businessmen who are smart and really open their eye to see things, they see what happened in China. They don't think that we do something like China is good for Hong Kong. I think they understand that. They are also ordinary people. So I mean, maybe
so
sometimes
you're saying categorically that you have never come across such pressure in your career.
No, I think everybody have faced that pressure. But I mean, journalists are bound to work under pressure. But I mean what we should do is to all
pressure
the time,
not to write certain things.
Yeah,
or let
you should survive, with it. But I mean, I just want our, fellow colleagues to stand up all the time, to tell the truth, to tell the people or their owners what they feel, tell the truth, That's what they are doing every day, So why not, you change it, after 97 or after, a certain time, You just do a job. I mean, that's okay, that's good for Hong Kong.
Hello, I'm Ilaria Maria Sala from La Stampa. I wonder how relevant is the presence of a lot of journalists or even editors who became journalists in the mainland and now are present in newsrooms in Hong Kong. If we know the case of a very prominent editor who used to work for China Daily. The jury is not entirely out any longer on how strong his impact has been on the South China Morning Post. But this is a process that has been ongoing in many other newsrooms, in Ming Pao as well. I think pretty much every newsroom in Hong Kong now has some journalists and editors who are from the mainland. Has this had an impact or not at all?
Shirley, I suppose you would be the... Casey may be in best position to answer that.
Okay. As you can understand, I will not comment on individual cases. And I have known many mainland-born journalists
Including George Chen, who was sitting
Yes,
there.
in my life. I would say that it would be unfair to assume all the mainland-born journalists come with a task or a mission. Mainland-trained and mainland-born, both. I would say that there are mainly two types of them. One, they come with the understanding of mainland China, and they being extremely vocal and critical of Beijing, even more critical than I am for us, who was educated in Hong Kong, because they know the system much better. They can easily guess out why there is such a policy is because of A, B, C, D, E, F, G, vested interest party, and that's why they being more critical on Beijing than many of us. But of course, at the same time, there are mainland trained journalists who come with a task or with a strong interest in towing the Beijing's line. So it won't be fair just to say that they are this or they are that.
And believe me, we can change them more than they can change us. So when people are living in Hong Kong, working here for several years, they like here. They love freedom. That's not about politics. That's just about human nature. And then I think the history, I think Ching-Cheung knows the best, is that during the June 4th, who quit the party and quit the Xinhua Se is the head of NCNA. Ching-Cheung, is it? He is the very senior party member. And when he lived in Hong Kong, he said a lot of things protecting the government line, But I think the guy really enjoyed the freedom of Hong Kong, and ultimately, I think partly because of the political reason, and partly because he really enjoy something, which Hong Kong owns, but he never treasured in mainland. So believe me, we will change them, when they live here and live with Hong Kong people.
Okay. I can see your hand, but George, are you responding to what's just been said? Because if you are, then I'll let you go first.
Thank you. So thanks for Shirley's mention. So I actually just come here to listen. I don't want to do that kind of self-promotion. But anyway, since you mentioned the issue, I was born in Shanghai. My first job was with the Jiefang Daily, the Jiefang Ribao, which is a communist party mouthpiece in Shanghai government. And I come to Hong Kong mainly because my ex-employer Reuters transferred me here in 2008. I think if you try to label people with mainlander or Hong Konger or American or whatever, you just make the whole society and the world more divided. I come to Hong Kong just like other people go to New York for the American dream. I come here for my Hong Kong dream. So that's just all I want to say. Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, very quickly. That lady there has been waiting for a long time. Can she ask the next question, please? Just looking at the time, we haven't got that many minutes left.
Thank you, Elaine Pickering. In the UK, the US, and all over the world, people tend to read the newspapers because they're particularly leaning in one direction, to the left, to the right, or whatever. They watch news channels because they're more right-wing or left-wing or whatever. In Hong Kong, as we become a more political place, to what extent is all this inevitable? That you're going to have publishers, editors, journalists who will lean in a particular direction and will censor or guide or manipulate even stories in that way. I mean, I know right now it seems like we're leaning in one direction, but to what extent is this a scary thing, and to what extent is this just an inevitable thing, and we've just got to sharpen ourselves up in putting more balance into our reporting?
Well, I think in a plural society, we should accommodate different sorts of political views. So if certain newspaper hold a certain type of view and the other hold an opposite view, that's fine. what we are worrying about is a concerted effort by some political power to make use of all sorts of means to entice people into taking a certain political line. That is a difference. That is different from what you mentioned in what we should have in a plural society. And in since the handover, we have seen a lot of efforts put into Hong Kong media industry to convert their editorial policies. That is the thing that is really worrying to us.
May I add to that is I strongly agree with what Ching-Cheung has said. Political inclination is very different from being told what you have to write. When you get calls from Beijing officials on your editorial line, it's not about political inclinations. And when you get your whole page dictated by Beijing officials during their chief executive elections, that is not political inclinations. So there is a big difference between that and what we are seeing now. And I would like to all draw your attention to certain thing is, let's not just focus on the attack, on the physical violence. Let's look at the invisible violence that we've been experiencing in the media in the past 1 year. And the big question is, why all these cases in the past few months? Why is it intensifying? I think that is the big questions each and every of us should ask. And for me, I would draw your attention to a report that was on Hong Kong issued by by Beijing's top officials in Hong Kong, Zhang Xiaoming, before he came to Hong Kong. It spells out a very tight policy on Hong Kong. And the increased tightening of media happens more or less at the same time with that report.
JC, do you have anything to add? I'd like to have a chance to make an additional comment after your initial question. And then that gentleman will have the next question.
It would still be a question more than a comment.
Oh, okay.
Because
that's cheating.
Is it?
You've had your time. Sorry, can that gentleman
Then I'll comment.
Okay. Very quickly.
What do we mean then by mainlandization? If it's not just some, I think it has to be something that goes two ways, both from inside the newsroom and outside of the newsroom. I have heard people telling me that editorials they wrote were not accepted by a newspaper because they clearly said we will not run anything against Xi Jinping. And that was from a mainland-born and trained editor. And there seems to be, I wish Hong Kong's core values were able to change this different mentality as much as Casey seems to think. But in what I've seen in my experience in Hong Kong over quite a while now, this is the process that goes two ways. I don't want to talk about infiltration, that seems a bit too Cold War, but there seems to be something that does come both ways, pressure from the outside, but also changes from the inside.
So any thoughts on whether there's, so I suppose your question is whether there's,
You said that's a question.
yes it is, infiltration, liberal infiltration by introducing more mainland trained journalists with a political agenda into Hong Kong newsrooms.
Well, maybe I can offer some sort of information. Way back in the 1980s, when China started to negotiate the return of Hong Kong with the British, they have already set out a policy saying that the transition will be based on strength. Now, look, way back in 1980s, mainland China has very little strength in Hong Kong, politically, economically, culturally. But from that point onward, they have decided to have the transition based on their strength. And then 10 years later, in about 1991, Jiang Zemin has set out a policy saying that from now on we should participate full scale in Hong Kong's affairs. Full scale meaning economically, politically, and also culturally. And culturally means the harnessing the media sector. Now, these are all policies set before the handover. And in the initial years of the handover, we enjoy a relatively free time, with Beijing trying to prove to the world that they have their hands off Hong Kong, and we enjoy real autonomy, but not after 2003, when they have an about-face in their policies towards Hong Kong. You remember by 2008, they have come up with a policy of building up a second governing team, Team B, to supplement the Team A, which means the Hong Kong government. So you can see that from all these presidents, you can see that they have been planning this kind of gradual infiltration. I would like to employ our ex-AG's words on this situation. I like his word. He used the word subtle erosion and gradual abrasion of our core values.
Okay, thank you.
Subtle erosion and gradual abrasion.
Thank you. Okay, we only have time for one more question, unfortunately. This gentleman has been waiting for a long time. Sorry about that.
Right. Thank you. Gavin McDougall, former journalist. Just referring kind of exactly to what Ching-Cheong just said about subtlety, but we've also heard throughout this debate today and previously about feelings, about intimations. I think Shirley just used the term invisible orders, particularly when it comes to what can be particularly pervasive with self-censorship. It's very difficult to prove, or it seems very difficult to prove or give any concrete evidence. How do you draw the line between what everybody says they are feeling or feel they need to do to actual concrete evidence? How do you draw it back to, in some respects, what Stephen asked first? How do you draw it back to if there is indeed a coordinated campaign? How do you draw those lines?
No, sir, this is not supposition. This is direct fact. Because I'm sorry, some colleagues in the profession didn't want to volunteer information on the direct order from Beijing. In the newsroom, nowadays, it is commonplace to find editors killing an article simply they got a telephone from Beijing. I think several of my colleagues in the newspaper, in the media industry, offer me this kind of information. And I have thought of setting up a web page listing out all these concrete evidence. So this is not supposition. This is not just in Asia Week's mind, in Asia Week's column. It's not witch hunting. It's very concrete order from Beijing that we understand.
Casey, Shirley, do you agree?
Well, let me add to that is when we talk about you asking for whether there's a strategy, what you have to do is get yourself a piece of paper and a pencil, list out all the provocations in Hong Kong, and sort it out one by one. You can easily figure out not many is left. And for the remaining few, I say few, less than that, what they're seeing is there is management reshuffle, and then tidying up of ownership change, tidying up of columnists and commentator, and then a few has gone down with those strategy. The remaining few see the advertisement being pulled in a concerted effort. This is what we mean by strategy. it's one by one. They were removed or one by one. And to answer the questions about infiltration from that lady, infiltration does not come from outside, it comes from within. We've seen, I personally have seen many former colleagues or journalists that I've known for decades, how they have changed over the years.
Casey, anything to add?
My advice to our fellow colleagues is that when you pick up a call from Beijing, you said, hey, bye-bye, I'm very busy. And then you put down and write your own story, and then you give your articles or stories, and then that's it, your job. That's your job. You write down what you think, what you look, what you witness, okay? And that's the journalist's job. And then if there are someone who are keeping the door, who want to self-censor, and let them do, that's not the journalist's job, You just write it down, write your story, and then don't pick up those calls from Beijing, King-Cheung, is it right?
Okay,
So that's it, yeah.
Yeah. I'm afraid we have to wrap up, unfortunately. We're 6 minutes past, but maybe you can grab hold of the panelists and ask them afterwards. So thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, for attending today's lively lunch. I've got souvenirs for the three of you. Hang on 1 second.